we're
Yep.
gonna
You got it?
keep on going here.
I know. I mean, it's like,
On a roll?
Yeah, with my kids.
Okay,
it's not a mess.
we left off
So that's
agreeing that we would double check the
Karen,
site.
the Shriver, and Vanessa, I did include my. You gotta love that. But there's a
All right.
paragraph on each of them.
So we are on what page now?
We're down to
Page,
code enforcement.
page
Yeah.
10, and I mean, there's nothing really to say about code enforcement, honestly. It's pretty much the same. Season's been knocking it out of the park, you know, that's,
Okay.
so,
We're on 10.
How many more houses to knock
The
down?
last one.
well, we've got room, proposed for 2 non-hillside demos of our choice, if we should find some.
We have Borough Avenues, that's on
Oh, that's an asbestos remediation that we gotta,
there, that's on there. That's probably the best one. I think Baldwin Road.
What about Coletta's neighborhood? I'm gonna get that one. That's this. best.
CDBG app.
Okay.
So we will probably hear back, like September, August of next year, whether we're getting the funds for that, because that's.
So that's gonna stand.
Can we just spend those funds now and hope we get them later, so we don't have to look at that?
No.
We're gonna drive out of town?
No, sorry.
How about the corner of Steuben and West Crafton? I think that place, they need to clean it up.
Well, that's not a demolish
I know it
conversation.
isn't.
Yeah.
So, okay,
So,
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
so basically what we're
I got it on
saying
the corner where
is,
the lights are.
Okay, meeting's back in order, right?
yes,
Back in order.
What did you say about the one on Bar?
That's good.
Oh, there's-
Remediation.
yeah, there's asbestos, they found asbestos in it, so the price like doubled.
I'll do it for like
It's-
$20.
I
No math.
just,
but,
when you're doing a demo,
okay,
Okay.
but I think the question here with the thing about bar and, well, you said Baldwick, you've applied for
CDBG,
grant money. And so it would be, if we don't get it, we can in 2021 decide to allocate the funds. I mean,
Alright, I mean, that's
it's
fine.
what, I mean,
It
we're
is what it
talking,
is.
how much money to take that one down?
mid-40s.
As opposed to 10.
Yeah, I mean, I
So-
wanna pay 10. Don't get me
Pardon?
wrong, I wanna pay 10.
Yeah.
Oh, for the CDBG, I mean, we're looking.
No, if it wasn't where it is.
If it wasn't up, yes,
And the
yeah.
average is 10,000, the quoted cost for taking Baldwick down is over $40,000. So,
Borough Avenue, right?
no, we're talking
Next.
Baldwick, we'll
We're
talk
talking
Bar next.
Baldwick
Bar is
right
the
now.
same, a different situation, but the same thing.
Because it's
So-
on the hillside.
There is an application in that may get us most of the money to take Baldwick down. And so what we're saying, you know, and I'm the one that's living 4 houses down from there, it's just gonna have to stand another year, and Public Works is gonna need to make sure that they keep it boarded up.
Yeah.
So, but
So
I
the
guess
bar
our
one
question,
already had its asbestos?
no, it has not. So can we talk, can we clear up Bar,
What?
the situation they, so it was one that we had targeted,
Mm-hmm.
then they went in and found asbestos,
The
so,
asbestos report, yeah.
This is the corner, on the corner, right?
What's the
One of
address?
the tree on the roof.
Yeah.
1528 bar.
okay. So we were prepared to take it down in the $10,000
In
range?
the $20,000
In the 20,000
range.
range.
We were originally, the estimate was 19 before they found asbestos. It
Okay.
jumped up to like 41.
Okay, so we have another $40,000 issue.
And we're sure that one needs to be demolished?
Is that the one that's got the tree
Tree coming behind.
Yeah,
growing out of the roof?
yeah.
I haven't let the
So-
asbestos people.
Okay, so the question is, and this has been my
If someone
call
knows the
every
flipper,
year,
that's
are we
also-
really putting enough
Yeah.
in our demolition budget?
It's a
And
joke.
are we willing to look at either changing some other line items or being prepared to draw down our reserves, that 1.4 million, and bring this up a little bit more? And I think personally, as I'm hearing more about Bar, it's like,
I mean,
what are our options?
I
We
would
need to-
I would
that needs to
recommend
go.
taking a look at, so the CDBG demo money, we were using it actually pretty regularly for, several years, about maybe 7, 6, 5 years back. one on Lincoln came down, one on Union, I think another one on Bar, actually nearby. But for whatever reason, there were some changes to the program that made it much more difficult to get demo money. We've been informed by the COG, who is the one that makes these CDBG grant applications on behalf of, Alameda County does it through the COGs, that it's much more likely that those
Yeah,
funds are
so-
gonna be available again. So, we went
So
for
the
the big
question is
one.
Yeah. We're past the deadline.
Well, we're past the pre-app deadline. We could certainly discuss, trying to put in another demo app if they would be willing to take
But
that.
are those applications, they're tied to specific properties?
I'd have to go back and check for sure, to be honest. I mean, it's about the same cost, so we could pick Bar instead. I just think this is
I think some of or can we put another application in?
I would
or
have
more,
to,
or
I would
not?
have to investigate that, because they do have a pre-app and a concurring resolution deadline that did just pass,
So-
Yeah.
so.
My suggestion would be to take a look at that, but I think we have to have a serious
I
discussion
mean, why
about
can't we
whether
just draw
this
down the
budget.
reserve one time, because these are one-time costs, really.
Right.
We're not-
Well, I mean,
So-
one time, I suppose,
Well-
is,
Well, I mean, there's houses for sale, right?
There's a broader
Bar that are-
conversation about, what are the objectives, the mission, vision here, and I think, so that now we're getting into this COGS that Eric had put together with like the deteriorating properties and the public safety and infrastructure thing, and, patiently, waiting to get through some of these things, like, so the blighted properties and, let's say, I'll call it blighted, deteriorated walkways, trees, that kind of thing, like, I would call it like one-time capital costs, or costs that have to be made to catch us up, like, basically, how are we gonna catch up? And,
so, I mean, there was some sort of blighted, property list that was adopted as part of, you have to certify certain properties through CDBG. I think there were about 10 on there, almost all of them are down 5 years later. The properties that are of greatest concern, even, I had Season put me a list together, one of them has been condemned, since then. The other one is on its way possibly later this week. Actually, 2 of them have been condemned. One of them is the duplex on Stanwood. Brad, I think you and I spoke about that one. And there's somebody that's interested in that through the vacant property recovery program, so we've been advising her on, how to get the resources of the
I mean,
county.
that house is probably, from the outside, like.
Yeah, the porch
doable.
thing is
The
kinda,
porches are one,
Yeah.
but like some of the other ones that we're discussing though, like
Yes.
the one on Baldwick, I mean, those are,
Right.
those are
Well, that's-
patients who get.
that one,
Yeah.
and then 1528 Bar, and I mean, like, that's the list. So, not only have we pretty much knocked out the blight list from a handful of years ago, we've got a couple more properties on the next one, but it's not filling up as fast as it used to. So, I mean, that doesn't mean that there isn't more work,
Finish line and.
but,
That's
you
good.
know,
Well, yeah,
that's good, because
but we're
I
getting
think part of
somewhere.
it is the economic climate's improving, that they're not going to that state. So
Right.
that's great. So going back to like a risk assessment view, setting up the criteria so we can make educated, defensible decisions on how we're gonna deploy the capital. So is 1528 Bar a significant risk, and what, and why? And then, if you said, Phil, you have $40,000 to spend this year, are you gonna catch up on trees, are you gonna catch up on, are you gonna tear down Bar or Baldwick? Well, let's talk about risk and liability to the borough, and that's what I sort of want us to get to. And when when we make the decisions this budget cycle, what's gonna save us the most on liability,
So the thing, and I hear exactly what you're saying. And it's this exact discussion that makes me go back to one of the things that I've talked about in the past is we should have a mechanism to be discussing these and coming to the budget with those decisions made. Because trying to make them in these last moments is just cause for not making good decisions and getting contentious. But I hear what you're saying, and I personally agree that we should have more in the budget and be more willing to potentially draw down some of our reserves to make a bigger lift. And maybe what we do is we say, okay, what do we have the stomach for putting number-wise, and then do, whether we have an ad hoc committee or whatever, to really make the decisions about how are we going to spend it. Like you say, what are our trade-offs, what are our risks, and what most needs to be done.
So what I just heard is in our budget, we don't have room currently to give another 40,000-ish to knock down 1528 Bar, because we're gonna do the one on Baldwin, or vice versa, doesn't
No,
matter.
yeah, no, we
But-
have, Baldwick is not in our budget because we're counting
Well,
on.
We're counting on that.
Here's
So what we're saying is,
Yes.
what you're kind of proposing here is if we increase that budget to cover one of them, and then we get the grant for the other one of them, then we're caught up.
Right, but Philip is
Well,
talking about other things besides
Philip
taking
is talking
down.
about the grander priorities of the things that we're, so what my point is maybe it's not a bad idea to do this, and I'm trying to say, let's move forward, and put the money in, is what I'm suggesting. Put the money in and move forward, because now you have a clean slate to manage your vision, mission, and objectives from, right? Because you're not carrying the baggage, well, these are the ones we still have to clean up, how do we prioritize those, because we made a commitment to do this. There is no more commitment to do those. It seems to be, what I'm hearing you say is, oh, it's not, oh, surprise, you forgot about 12311 Street, right? There's no more
I mean,
after this
perhaps.
per se, something.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
And the rate,
But
the
like
rate
the
of new
original,
ones.
the original like list, so to speak, or like all of the houses that were kind of.
This gives you a clean slate,
That we were
wipes
aware
it
of.
clean, you
Yeah, I know, I
can
mean,
now
it's not
plan
like-
from,
Stuff's gonna
you can
happen.
follow the
Yeah, it doesn't
objectives.
mean-
I think
just means
it
like-
makes
And then
sense.
going
Yes,
forward, we can go
Because
back to.
if we had a list of 20 more behind this, how do you prioritize that? And that goes back to that greater strategic plan. But what I'm hearing is this is the last one on the list. Why get to the finish line and wait?
I think that,
And you're not gonna do anything now anyway,
well, no,
in terms of wrecking balls. You're putting it in a budget,
that's true.
so you could always, whoever's next, whatever happens, you could always change it. You'll have a windfall.
Or not spend it.
Right, by not spending it next year, it goes back into your reserves. But if you don't budget it now, it makes it more difficult later to justify pulling that
Right, I
out.
mean, I think sort of the two, and this is, one is highly specific to this time period, which is because this opportunity for demo money may suddenly be back online, it wouldn't hurt for some of the bigger ones to see how we fare on Baldwick, because that'll be a
So
bellwether
there's
when a
nothing-
house isn't gonna fall off a
Yeah,
hill.
but so there's nothing wrong with upping this line item to
Sure.
60K
I,
That
and
sounds
working on
good.
getting it down with state money.
overall, my only caution is that, and this is just, the financially conservative manager side of me,
Well,
that,
we-
I guess what I'm
that,
saying is,
that-
if I-
well,
Let
that-
one at a time, you go.
yeah, so it's just that, getting in the habit of saying, not that this isn't what we're saying here, I think it's a point well taken, but getting in the habit of saying, well, we can always just add more to the reserve fund drawdown revenue line item is not really a place that I feel comfortable encouraging.
No one's saying that. We're saying this is the
Well, but that's
last
what
one
we
on the
have to
list.
do for
Yeah,
this,
fill out the
so,
column.
as long as we're doing that with the caveat of, if we do that every
Right.
year, it may not be there to do it again, then, yeah, that's,
I'm totally with you.
yeah.
So earlier in the year when we did this, I know, I'm jumping ahead, but it's because I don't want to get down the road. We made a choice to put 40 in here to do, or 60 in here to do the demos, and we have to deal with the nuisance tree situation, and I wanna make sure that if it's one or the other, I'm saying I'm going to choose the tree situation right now over the blighted building situation right now.
I
That's-
would too.
Okay, that's where I'm coming from.
Right, well, okay.
So, but if you're saying we can do both, then.
Well, I
then
think one of the things is to think about that and to consider it.
You're not gonna know what the tree issue is until the inventory is completed.
Which is supposed to be any day
That's
now.
gonna be your priority trees.
I know Susan Muka's hounding the
Right.
tree inventory
So
guy,
where is that gonna show up, the tree
Trees.
stuff? Is
In shade trees, which is,
separate budget?
page and a half ahead, nope, section 455.
Still in the general fund though.
Yes.
General fund, 455. All right, so we know that we want to at least model
Mhm.
and think about and maybe finalize discussion at the next meeting.
Mhm.
Yes.
I'm,
It was
at this point,
$30,000.
I'm saying, let's look at what it looks like
Mhm.
to put the money in the budget for taking MAR down without
Right,
grant money.
so bump it up to 40.
We're gonna bump it up to
60.
60.
Well, 20 is just there,
So
like,
you
as
don't,
an
we don't
option.
have to,
No.
on the, so basically what we're saying is our two biggest ones, and there's nothing else that's like right behind it.
So which,
So we
Yeah.
only have to take it up to 40.
Yes,
So we have to increase it by 20.
yes.
Okay, and so when we get to the shade tree, let's be prepared to have the discussion about, let's put some significant money in there, and we'll bump it against the results of the tree commission. Right, and we can always make adjustments, but I don't think it should be, personally, I don't think it should be one or the other. I hear what you're
I
saying.
agree, why would you gum?
Right,
Well,
exactly.
I mean, really.
Yeah, why should,
This is why
exactly,
we're.
exactly. All right, let's move on.
No, I mean, I'm saying, if we can't do that, then
Right, let's move on.
how do we do it?
Okay.
Okay, Rob, unless there's anything you really want to call out in Public Works, I don't think there's anything particularly remarkable that's, worth getting in depth in. Pretty much business as usual, so.
So any
I
kind
want
of
to see that pothole repair truck.
Ca- Any
I have a
capital
pothole
improvements
right
for
here.
storage, the Quonset hut that we've been talking about, wait till 2021, maybe we'll have additional revenues to.
RCAP, perhaps,
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of what the
Okay.
funding request could be used for.
So I definitely think over the next 5 years, we should invest in a structure to protect our new equipment.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, and I totally advocate for having that kind of planning discussion going on through the course of the year, so that long before we get to this date, we have a plan and a
We can
direction.
build a house there.
Okay. All right.
Moving on to page 11, is that what we're doing?
Yeah, so, there's not much to call out in recreation either. I mean, this is mostly pool maintenance, operations, repairs. Again, on your agenda on Monday, you will see a motion to approve the purchase of a new pool cover that is different from the pool liner, which is a six-figure repair that we've got a
An
grant in
application.
for, at GDF, which is a county gaming economic development fund. That is something different from the pool cover, which is the thing that makes it so nobody falls into the pool, when it's closed. Ours is falling apart, so
Okay.
we
So that's
have-
why we haven't put it on yet?
Yes,
the
so,
project's on, you'll have a-
yeah,
How many years did we have that for?
It is
5?
bad.
I'm not sure when it was, but it was before I was
Yeah.
there. before.
I was there today, I mean,
Was
yeah.
it?
So, but anyway, we got 3 quotes, we've got, a motion set for the agenda to purchase it. It'll be here within, a week or two, and that's gonna be incurred in the 2019 budget, so you're not gonna see that in any sort of,
That's why I was just going, I was like, why are we talking about this
Right.
here?
Well,
That's 19 items.
because we didn't expend that line item, which would be another thing that I
Oh,
would
so
call
we
out.
gotta budget it next year because we expect.
That line item that it is going to go in, which would probably be helpful if I told you which one it was, is on page 12, 452.72,
Oh, wait, we don't have it.
capital improvements. And so you see, we've only spent about 3,500 in that. There's 30,000
26, I think it was 17.
for the, so, yeah, it's about 18. So anyway, that is where that purchase is going to go. That is why it has not been expended yet. So just FYI, we're getting that main expense done. And then, once we get to the capital projects fund, which we will hopefully make it to quickly after this, we will talk more about the grant that we got from DCED.
So,
And the
I just wanna pause on that swimming pool. It seems like it gets, the swimming pool, the sled riding hill, there's a couple of places in Crafton that get a lot of attention in this region, just from our community, something people take a lot of pride in, et cetera. I guess my question is, that swimming pool, doesn't seem like the locker rooms and the place has got a whole lot of maintenance, kind of, and not maintenance,
It's
but I
just
mean,
getting old.
it's just old,
Yeah.
right? All the showers, every shower head is different, every this is different, the concrete's cracked. You know, is that something that, you know, that we can talk about? Because it seems like that would be a place to put some money into. If you feel like by that point, it's too risky and we need to save that money, you strike it. But to not have it seems like, you know, it's a big miss because it's such a showpiece of the community. I mean, to me, it seems, you know, I don't know, it just seems like to skip over it and not debate whether or not extra money should be set aside for the general less oldness.
Well, to be clear, we have a $300,000 grant application pending right now that we should know before the end of the year.
But that's a liner, right?
Well, that's for a liner amongst other upgrades, like for, the playground safety surface, for a couple just little things we could do in
I'm
fences
just talking
and
about
whatnot. So,
Specifically, the pool,
liner,
no,
which is.
he's
liner's
talking
only
about
You're talking about the
facility.
facilities, well. Oh,
We're,
it's
you're
100.
talking about the fixing up the showers and.
Yeah, just the general
Yeah,
piece of the place.
and I'll bet you, and we could explore it, I'll bet you there's probably some type of grant money that we could use or
We-
look into.
We have an
actually-
RCAP allocation from several years ago that I've asked them to look into drawing down in January. Also, there's still $10,000 in just the general capital improvements that we could easily just put to the building. It's not allotted to anything right now.
Seems like a little refresh would go a long way for the community to say,
Sure.
oh, wow, they were hard at work this winter, this looks nice
Yeah.
around
You just
here.
said something. You just said something. RCAP again?
Yeah, so it's a thing that you can put funding requests in for
I
every
know, but
couple
you
of
said something
years.
they had.
2013,
So there's funds allocated to us that we didn't use, that we can use, that's set aside for us?
perhaps.
We don't know.
They're not allocated to us,
I mean,
they're money that's spent, so if you get in line, you might get it, but we haven't been getting in line.
the funding, I mean, this is something that just in the last week, we've had several conversations with Rep. Deasy's office, where apparently somebody put in a, request to get in the port bill in 2013. It's good for 10 years for Crafton Park improvements. Presumably related, trust me, this was
No,
the
this is
reaction
like-
that I had.
It's what we've
So-
been fighting about for the last, 2 years. What all?
Right.
How do we not?
Well, 2013.
I think there have been.
Nobody in this room was on council.
No, I just mean
in
like that would be
2013.
really great information to know.
I
in
think we've gone through
2017
four managers
when
since
we were
then,
pulling
so
each
that
other
may be
and
why the
stuff.
institutional knowledge didn't
Let's
transfer.
just call the guy and give him the $20.
We need documentation.
Right?
That's
Well,
what I'm trying to
that's
do.
just- that's just
I
what
will
we're
not,
doing.
I mean, I'm not, that's good, that's a good thing.
I'm
Just saying,
hoping
you know,
we may be able to
everyone's
make a
stuff.
request to draw some of that down
There
in
was a lot of
January.
shit going on
So-
in 2013, believe me. It was nothing though.
I think Aaron will probably do a big portion of any remodeling, rehab of the.
Yeah, and that's already funds we have budgeted, so.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah, I think that's probably.
So what I'm hearing is, there's no need, on the record, there is no need to increase the budget for the pool, because it seems like there's enough possible kind of slushy revenue streams to give the place a little refresh so it doesn't look as old as
Yes,
it does next
I
year
would agree with
from
that.
this year.
We'll make it look.
It was called the hole.
Right.
Back then.
Right,
Oh, my.
okay.
Okay.
So
All right,
let's
moving on.
Let's skip
We're
over the
already
park
into this.
section, there's nothing remarkable there, business as usual, and go straight to shade trees. So, the, no, I don't think this is bad.
So you really have bumped it up already quite a bit.
Yeah, well, so this is actually probably the community that has a regular shade tree maintenance budget that is most financially similar to us is Edgeworth, I always forget which one's on the east end of Pittsburgh. Yeah, Edgewood Borough. That's about how much they spend on their tree maintenance every year. So, we may need to actually kick a little more depending on what the inventory results are. But, this is a line item that did not exist prior to last year, and about half of it was budgeted for the tree study, which we will be paying out when it's done. So all of this $30,000 is intended to go towards if there's, a dangerously dead tree, getting it taken down, pruning, if that's sort of, just whatever comes out of the recommendations. But that's dedicated new money
So
that we.
again,
Yeah.
I see that you've built that much in, but that's based on a community that's been doing a regular job.
Yes, yes,
And this community has not been doing a regular job,
right.
so again.
TBD, recommendation TBD is the
Right.
comment on that one.
Okay.
So,
So, do you think that you're going to have results in time to up this, or should we just proactively up it?
I
and
would,
see
I would
what this
say
looks like?
prior to the next budget meeting, yeah. I mean, based on the timeline that I've been given,
You mean
We
prior to
should.
the special meeting? My gut feeling it's gonna be we should be 60 in that fund. And my
Well,
question
regardless.
is, so my question is, going back to the ordinance that we passed, with the sidewalks that have lifted, what is our obligation?
We have no obligation. We just had the solicitor, we had a meeting with the one,
Right,
the one church, and it is clear, sidewalks are still the responsibility of the abutting, property owner.
Right.
So we do not have, I mean, basically if there are, if there are tree health issues that we need to take care of, those are, there are certain ones that we can take care of, but still, the way that ordinance is written, there's still a requirement if, say, somebody wants a shade tree taken down for whatever reason, they still need to make the application. We are not obligated to pay to remove shade trees.
right, I'm not saying that.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm just being clear.
I'm saying about where the roots have lifted.
We have no obligation
All right,
on,
then when we did the ordinance, I misunderstood what we passed, because
that's
I thought
the
when we were-
situation, that is the situation, that's the legal, interpretation.
Because I know Season was looking at using asphalt over concrete to allow the roots to flex.
yeah, I mean, that's something that the part of,
All of the, so that's part of where, changing some of the.
construction standards.
The construction
Yeah.
standards that would allow for that.
Which were last
And
adopted in
certainly-
2005, so.
I mean, so those are not mutually exclusive.
That would look terrible.
Okay, that actually.
Asphalt's not gonna,
That's
that's
not
not.
the
Really?
answer.
We like
But
that.
there are
Saying
other.
that.
Oh,
I'm disappointed.
it's
Terrible. I'm just, I mean,
Absolutely
not, I mean.
Oh, hold on,
it's
two, one at a
nice
time,
to-
please, we're like,
It's really nice to
Well,
help
it's
out
just an
people
option.
Oh,
I just feel like,
Season went to Amherst and
I have no
she,
way to know this,
she liked
but like,
Lakewood, so.
I think most people feel like the sidewalks are somewhat in like a squishy middle zone, where maybe some homeowners that are really on the ball might not know that they're not responsible for it, but I think the vast majority don't know or don't care and assume that it's the public right away. So, this is just where I know what you're gonna say, but my point is that, it would be nice to be able to find the middle ground to assist
well, we
some
certainly
somewhere.
can still work on a different middle ground
You know what I
going
mean?
forward.
Just because like I'm fairly
But
certain.
that's not where we are now,
Right.
Waverly.
No, I hear you.
I mean, Season and I worked together to call around to pretty much every borough that was even remotely close to us in population, and this is standard. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to operate at the standard as a rule, but this is,
Right, I know we have no
You
legal
know.
obligations.
Right.
it's just, and we did take about the most robust shade tree ordinance that we could find to model ours off of, which is Swickley's. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And certainly,
And we passed it, so.
we did. And,
Ample.
the net effect is what it is, and if we are determined as a body to make it be different, we have the opportunity to do that.
Totally, but I get, so this budget, for me, like, I'm gonna actually flip on this with Philip, I guess, because I do think that we do need to do some catching up, but I'd much rather see, I think this is a good number to start with, frankly, because it's definitely something that wasn't there before, and, I think that the houses and the stuff that we talked about, is in the, that stuff is a higher level in the comprehensive plan, and I think it's more noticeable. And I think that's just my feeling. I think the trees and stuff might have to come, if we have to obviously this is a document for prioritization, so we have to
Right,
prioritize what we want to do.
but Philip's point is well taken. We talk about risk and liability. So this may be somewhat of a lower priority, but we have something, especially once we have an inventory and we know that there are risks, then we become more liable if something happens.
No, I hear that loud and clear. But, you know, that- yeah, his point, I mean, I hear his point. I know where this is gonna go. I know what the ultimate goal is. It's just that in light of the ordinance that we passed, that now, you know, apparently still leaves that limbo where, you know, we're not gonna be able to assist the homeowners whose trees have kind of.
To replace the
My
sidewalks. no.
60K projection, just my guesstimate,
Mhm.
is just for removal, not even to address
I mean,
the
look,
sidewalk.
I
We just
think
have a lot to catch up
the
on.
realistic look at this is, it's probably going to be expensive.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be blown
Well,
away
what?
if we did have, you know, a 60K upfront care potential. We're going to have to grapple with the reality of establishing a realistic, annual, consistent, you know, maintenance budget. And maybe that means raising it a bit in the front years, but I would be shocked if we could catch everything up in 1 year, just period,
There's
you
also
know.
great ideas like we did with the grant program for the backflow. There's probably a lot
Yeah.
of ideas, but we can't do anything until we have the inventory complete.
Right.
We don't know what we don't know.
This is a placeholder where I tried to be generous with the understanding that it could go up. So anyway.
So let's see if we
Yeah.
can get that inventory in, and how that affects it, but I think generally, we seem to be in favor of getting that number higher.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right, let's move on.
Yeah, all
Let's
right.
move on.
Nothing really to say about 457, 459, you know, business as usual.
Has the library asked for anything different?
They're not.
Okay,
Oh, I skipped right over it because it's tiny. Yeah, subscription services in 462 is highlighted in red because that's where we were paying for Savvy Citizen before. As I said, I rolled that into sort of that overall SaaS
right.
line item. You'll see the newsletter line item has bumped up a lot because the last newsletter that we did was like a quarter full mailer that cost us $1,000 or $2,000 to put out, whereas the 16, 18, 20 page newsletter that we do now is about $2,500 pop, and then we do the bulk mailer permit. That's probably the thing that we have most vocally gotten positive responses about this
Every
year.
place I go.
So, I recommend, the quarterly newsletter.
Oh.
Yeah, so there was a placeholder 3,000 because it was $1,000 the last time we did a newsletter. It's closer to around 3 plus,
And we're talking about doing 3 a year, is that it? 4 a year.
We kind of just, because we so under projected it.
Right, you did 3 this year. but you want to
2019 we
do
did
4.
3, yeah,
You wanna
but
do
we're gonna
4.
ramp it up to quarterly. And I mean, people ask, how do we get in, when is it coming out? It's,
Yep.
yeah.
Thank you, it was a long
I was
time
thinking
coming.
of that.
Yeah,
Yes.
Hey, we have fun putting it together too, it's really great. So, yeah, I'll be happy if that gets approved back in the budget. Not much to say about debt service, except you will notice the line item for the Duncan principal and interest payments are notated as paid in full. The line item will eliminate in 2023 because that's just when it's gonna drop off the budget, as a legacy line item, but, nothing in that one going forward. Other than that.
Yes, what was the intent? I mean, obviously we don't use it, you're eliminating it. The Crafton Performing Arts lineup, what was that used for? If we have
Which
a,
one?
we're back up on 58.55.
It's been long enough that nobody in the office is really sure what, maybe some sort of supplies or something, but it just kept getting budgeted every year because a different person was writing the budget every year. So I stopped
Can
doing
we
that.
leave it in there and do the wood on the front?
Well, I mean, that would be a park maintenance and
coming up.
repair line
That's-
item, that wouldn't
That'll be
be,
next year.
Yeah.
Well, there's like $250.
right, I mean, I think it was literally like for
We're gonna
printed
start the
stuff,
big show.
so,
We're done paving today.
um,
Today was, yesterday we finished paving.
okay, so,
The alleys look good. Is that,
You see the Borough shelter, that's what they're using the same material, with the 2 other shelters on the stage. Formula spikes it, okay.
Okay,
there isn't really much to comment on for the rest of this page, this is all kind of just the nitty-gritty, boring finance coding stuff, for recurring expenses and, putting money away in the pension that's already an amount set by regulation. So, I would just call everyone's attention to the very last section on the general fund expenses, interfund operating transfers. You will notice the highlighted in purple, new line item, transfer to capital projects fund that is budgeted at the $60,000 playground renovation project match for the DCD grant that is large enough that it is going to live in the capital projects fund, which has been restructured and brought back, hopefully better than ever in 2020. We do have still the pending app in the Gaming Economic Development Fund, so that match potentially could come down based on, you know, what we get from that. So again, anything that's coming out of the budget seesaws down that reserve drawdown, anything that's going up brings that number up again. That's a neutral statement, you know, but so if that match comes down, we might end up sort of neutral in that line item even if we add expenses elsewhere. So we've made it through the general fund, congratulations. Everything else is one page. So I'll try and run through the highlights in 3 of the 4, and then we're going to go into a little more depth with the capital projects fund since it is new and improved for 2020. So road fund should be the one that's set up next in your packets. I mean, I think we all know that we've had a couple issues in the last few years with either contractors not completing the work with the 2018 paving program and then declining to draw down, you know, the full amount of work that was available to them. Mealy just had a really nasty weather season. They're doing the concrete work as, well, probably not as we speak because it is 9:12 p.m. But, you know, in theory, the equipment was mobilized this week and they've started doing the ADA ramps, you know, some of the manhole cover areas. Basically, the concrete work was much easier for them to mobilize when the weather was so good. It is most likely that the actual asphalt paving will occur in 2020 for the 2019 paving program. So you will see in the expense section, 439.455, road program prior year. That is for funds that were not expended this year. Look for 300,000. Alice. So that's for some of the leftover funds that could have been allocated to independent in 2018 had they, or in 2019 if they had come back and finished more of the work, and the payments that, as far as we know, Mealy is more than happy to continue, you know, doing the work in 2019. They're not going to decline it. It's just that the asphalt is going to get bumped back. However, because we had 2 years in a row that were kind of funky, we have enough funds that were put in the reserve to complete all of that paving work and still have a perfectly healthy paving program for 2020, as well as have a $126,000 transfer to do the match and the final engineering work for the Green Light Go grants, the 4 traffic signal grants we got from PennDOT at the end of 2018 that are expected to be in the ground in 2020. So pick your streets. Pick them early so we don't do this again. And get ready for more asphalt going in the ground in 2020 than we've probably ever had before at one time.
In 1 year.
So, yeah, I mean, it's looking good. The revenue is just a fourth of the total tax revenue that we take in, property tax-wise, protected the same way. Yeah. Any questions?
Cool. I think it's done next year then.
Twice.
Where's the mobile brick pothole repair truck? I still don't.
Oh, yeah. Also, to call out, new line item, in-house paving materials, now that they have the paver, $17,000 in there to buy the materials to continue doing that in 2020, so.
What about cobblestone?
Brick.
Brick. Where are we with brick? There's nothing set in the
That's
brick.
part of the road program, and probably when you have the funding, the money there, that needs to be discussed
Yeah.
later in the year, how much you want to put into asphalt, and how much you want to put into brick.
And that would all go into the same
So
road.
road
even though it's
Still
actually
road
the
Just the
program.
438.45?
No, that would be.
I'm sorry,
439.45, and I mean, brick repair is included in the paving program.
So
line.
paving includes the brick.
Oh, it's road,
Yeah.
it's a road.
It's a road program,
program.
it just was labeled.
So somebody says paving there because they like asphalt, and the residents here like their.
So
They're
shall we change it to road?
They're
I
actually,
mean, that's just how it was
they're
written,
actually
you
classified,
know?
they're actually
Pavers.
brick pavers,
Right,
right?
right.
So it's still.
Yeah, so it's still paving of some sort, okay.
Oh, yeah, there you go. This is why we have them. All right, no other questions, then we'll just, I mean, this is pretty cut and dry, so. Sewer fund. Good news. After working backwards through, averaging out the monthly bill that a Crafton resident tends to pay, splitting it between Alversan and Crafton and redesigning the funding formula entirely, we are on track with projected revenues at 74.09% at the end of Q3. You will see that in 2018, we under budgeted by about $200,000 how that was coming in. So looks like the new formula is working.
So we're sticking with the new formula and the new number is
Yep.
slightly higher?
Yep,
Okay.
they're,
So
you can,
last year, there was no seasonality, the last quarter was 25% of the year, is that what you're saying? Roughly?
what? I'm
Because
sorry,
we didn't have a
it's late.
seasonal variance, so Q4 last year didn't have a bump up that was more
Oh,
than
no,
25%.
no, so the Alcoasand, we get the bills monthly and then we remit to Alcoasand quarterly,
So the
therefore.
quarterly payment is equal, so us being at 75%-ish
Is
through three
accurate.
quarters is
Good.
safe to say we'll get 25%, it'll be the same
Yes,
expense
that
in the
is
fourth quarter.
super duper accurate. You will see that the portion that has been remitted to Alcoasand is accurate within 0.03%, so that was exciting. And also makes for a much more useful sewer fund, so. Anyway, something that we switched to last year was breaking out the engineering and the construction costs so that they were much more specific in where the funding was going, whether it's grow projects, just general engineering, general interest projects, or specifically the consent order agreements, those 10-year cycle repairs that we have to make based on the CCTV we do the year before. The very first expense line item, obviously, is a little higher than we thought was gonna come in. There was an opportunity to take the 60% design for Crafton Boulevard, to get it ready for the grant, and there's a lot of utilities that have to get moved around. The estimate went up, but that's why that looks like that. Overall, what we've got budgeted for a general project, which that was not coded as a grow project because it was not accepted as, that's not part of like a grow grant match or anything going forward. Any expenses related to that, since it's officially accepted as a grow grant, would be a grow grant line. Now, because it is such a significant expense for Crafton Boulevard and the South Grandview projects, those are gonna live in the capital projects fund because otherwise they would balloon the sewer fund out to twice of its real consistent size. And so it's kind of hard to get, for anyone reading it, to get an idea of what our real revenues and expenditures are if it's rocking around because of grants every couple years. So, but we'll get to that momentarily. 50,000 in the general engineering line item this year because we are doing that Johnston North Emily sewer repair project that we were waiting on the easement agreement to be executed for. You will see on your agenda on Monday a motion to approve the bid advertisement. It will not run until the beginning of January, but just, given the fact that we've been waiting a little while to get this project out. Approve it now so nobody forgets and have it hit the papers right away, so, we get a contract early on. So anyway, that's for the rest of the engineering project management work for that particular special project. 10,000 in the grow projects line for a smaller grant, which is the Sycamore Fountain Street sewer separation. We've kind of ran into a brick wall with the city in permitting because we have to discharge into their property, but still put it in there because it might move, although it's been here. So, consent order engineering, this is something that comes from the engineers. They estimate what, engineering costs they're gonna incur for the repairs that we're required to make on that 10-year cycle. The 312, 314, and 316 sort of ends of the line item coding match back to, turn it over, it's double-sided. If you go to 473.702, 704, and 706, you'll see that those match up with the construction, so there's kind of an internal consistency in the coding, and you can see, you know, where things go. So really, the main things in the expense section that are a little different are the transfer to the capital projects fund again, which will be the portion of the revenue that will go to, you know, the South Grandview match and partial Crafton Boulevard match as they start the work, mostly permitting and scoping. In 2020, the construction work won't really start until 2021, just based on how long it's gonna take to get that all in line. But also, since we passed that ordinance to establish the backflow prevention, you know, mini grant, $8,000 to open that up. We don't have any pending applications right now, but, you know, that'll, should we have, you know, 8 to 16 applications for a 50% match, you know, that, well, regardless of whether we get it or not, that's basically, setting that line item is, okay, this is how much money is available in this mini grant program this year. If somebody expends it, great. If they don't, it'll just stay there year to year, because that's how much we're willing to set aside for it. So, any questions about the sewer fund?
Which one's free of you? What was decided, was that brick or are you gonna asphalt?
They went with asphalt, because we were able to include the road work cost in the grant, since they consider asphalt and how you can, you know, sort of slope it and do the inlets to be stormwater control, whereas brick is not considered that. It would be out of pocket that way.
And the people there are aware of that, people that are.
We held a public hearing specifically to discuss
It was
that.
well attended.
Yeah, I would say there were
This
quite
is
a
on
few
the
people
House
there.
of Representatives, so yeah, I mean,
What?
yeah, it was like 10 people here.
Yeah,
People lived on Grandview.
Right.
yes,
So people know, okay.
yes.
Well, I can do.
Yeah, but they wanted brick.
It
Well,
wasn't
some
great.
did. Some
did.
said
Some
if
did,
it's
some
gonna
didn't.
cost an extra $150,000, then, oh, well, I guess asphalt's the way to go. You know, I mean, it was definitely a varied opinion, but $150,000 that can go to Crafton Boulevard, you know, it's quadrupling
Philip?
the match.
At the Monday meeting, are we gonna talk about cycle 5 for Borough?
Well, I think that the established plan was that we were gonna be reapplying for Crafton Boulevard to see if, since they raised the cap, if we could take advantage of that full match percentage. So, I mean,
So you're specifically asking, are we gonna talk about it this meeting?
Yeah, because from what I understand, there's gonna be opportunity to apply for some of the other projects. Just because we have these 2 projects granted, it doesn't mean that we should stop working
Right.
towards other projects.
yeah,
I don't know that we need to take it up at this
Yeah.
coming meeting.
Do we
have
know
other
when
things.
Alcoasand's scheduling those meetings?
next week, I think.
Jeez. Meetings to discuss
To
the
just
change
like
of the
for you
tax?
to, no, it's basically just to say, hey, look, here are
Okay, so
projects.
they're beginning to schedule them next week?
Like they're meeting with engineers for the communities
Okay.
next week typically. I mean, look, it's a $3.5 million project, you know, it's gonna
But I
blow
think
through
you're
most of
talking
the
about
sewer reserves.
additional,
Right, we had a list of 10 projects, we applied for 2, we have 8 more. So I just
well,
asking.
the engineer will be here, why, we can put it on the agenda to discuss.
That'd be great, I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, why stop now?
well, I mean, sure, I think that there's financial conversation to be had about the fact that, we'll see if we get this H2O grant in December, which, well, that's the deadline anyway. You don't have to
But-
apply for cycle 5 until June of next year. So this is not our only opportunity to get projects in front of Alcoasand.
Yeah, but I mean, it can't hurt to at least,
Yeah, I
To
mean,
be
that
early,
way there's.
I
no-
believe their plan is to still just bring all the projects and see how they feel.
right.
So, no change.
Oh, that's
really.
kind of their plan already?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
what we
well,
did
we'll
last
verify
year.
that. Let's just verify that on Monday when the engineer is here,
Mhm.
that they are planning
Yeah, I
on
don't understand.
having a meeting and,
It seems like the management of the borough is anti-brick, and the people that live here like the brick. And it just seems like that needs to be better understood by the community. 'Cause I've heard exactly the opposite of what you just shared on Grandview.
Yeah, me
And
What?
I've spoken easily to 10 people, that's why I'm confused.
And how many times have we talked about the fact that it costs, how many more times?
Yeah, I mean,
The total cost of ownership over a lifetime versus paving one time is not the same calculation.
Didn't we
But
say
you're
something
not
about
Rich
garbage
Gaten
trucks?
was talking about.
The weight.
I-
The weight?
No. If I remember correctly, anybody was here, I think one resident was real vocal about trying to keep the brick. I
No,
don't
it was
think-
one person that was vocal about let's put asphalt
Well,
down.
I guess we'll review the tape, because I don't remember that.
I don't
Okay, well, we'll review the tape,
Okay.
let's have more of a discussion.
Okay.
And again, that's gonna, I mean,
Before it
brick is
happens.
4 times the cost of
I know.
asphalt, so I mean,
Pave it all.
And it lasts 4 times as long.
just, it's gonna have to be a decision by the council. Do you wanna spend money on brick or asphalt, or do you wanna do the quarter miles, or half, 2 blocks, or do you wanna?
Right, but I think there was some discussion, and there was actually some question about whether it really is 4 times. I don't know, I'm not the expert, but we'll review the tape, and let's
Okay.
just make sure that we have more of a discussion on this before we pave over any more brick. But, you know, at the end of the day, what my personal feelings are, you want brick in front of your house, then you better be the one that's gonna be willing to pay for it. It's the sort of thing, why should those of us who have asphalt be paying for other people to keep their pretty brick? But that's my personal opinion. You know, that's not what the community
You know, all the
necessarily
walls are just getting up.
But let's keep that conversation going,
Right.
okay? Because I don't think, I don't think it's gonna be any.
Grandview was all part of the grant. How much
Yeah,
we could get
that
out
was,
of the
well,
grant.
that was the
That was all taken
point,
into
was
consideration.
if it was asphalt,
It was kind
covered
of,
by the grant.
it was, I believe, didn't we kind of tell them, like, hey, we're gonna, like, pass some free money over bricks, like, do you guys want the
Well,
sewers?
let's
Do you want
review the
brick?
tape. I think that's a good idea.
There are
And then
minutes
we'll-
accepted from the meeting.
Pardon?
I said there are minutes that were
Right.
recorded from the meeting,
Okay,
so,
let's finish this up and let's get out of here.
Yes, so that's it for the sewer fund. I don't really might have much to say about the Celebrates Fund, you know, this is still basically a baby fund. We're just kind of trying to see where the expenses are incurred, you know, how much is really coming in now. This is the first year that they've had this shortened event. So, you know, the previous deposits aren't necessarily comparable to what they got this year. There's a little note at the bottom that says this budget should be treated as a general idea for the next few years as changes in length of the event and new adoption of a dedicated and reported budget become more accurate over time. So I pretty much just plugged in what they had this year and we're gonna see what happens. You know, they do have a small reserve built up over the years before we were actually recording their line items, so, you know,
Did we
nothing.
get a final report from that?
Well, this is like the finance. Your line items.
That was a boost made and stuff on it?
That would be in the
Individual-
revenue. Oh, you mean what each
But
booth
details,
made?
details.
Yeah, I can check in with Angela. From what I understand, they had to cancel the prior meeting because there was not, yeah.
And so I guess we haven't gotten.
So November
final
is their
detail
final meeting for
information
this
from
year.
them.
Unless there are any questions, there's, you know, not much to say about how it was projected. It was basically just what happened this year and we'll see,
That's
you
right.
know, what happened going forward, so. All right, capital projects fund, this is new, sort of. You know, as I referenced before, we had a capital reserve fund. I think that the original intent was something like this, but, you know, sometimes single line items got opened for single grants. They were used for 1 year. They were opened because we were hoping we would get a grant, and then we didn't, and so you just kind of had this hanging revenue. It was, you know, 6 weeks I didn't have enough runway to figure out exactly what was going on to use it last year, which is why, for example, you saw the Green Light Go potential construction, you know, disbursement land in the road fund and the full Borough projects for, I guess we only had one last year, but you get the point. Everything landed in the sewer road or general fund. This is going to help us keep these, you know, consistent revenue funds, road, sewer in general, consistent, like Eric, we're at the very beginning when you looked and said, oh wow, like why do we only have 4,000 this year? Well, you know, So this is gonna prevent sort of the rocketing around of how large these funds are, just because we're expecting a $704,000 grant. So, the way that it's proposed to be structured is opening essentially a revenue line item for the categories of state grants, county and agency grants, so foundational, if we get some sort of nonprofit or something like that, interfund transfers and reserve transfers, which those should be familiar from the other funds. The first two sections, 355, which is state, grant revenue, and 357, which is county shared revenue, typically coded, I pretty much just pulled any operational category that you could potentially do something in, sewer and water. That matches back to the 08 sewer fund.
These are all new codes to us, but they're not new codes within the Commonwealth.
Correct. Yeah, I pretty much just go straight by the chart of accounts as closely as I can. So anything that would match up to the leading number of a fund, like for example, road and street, that's coded as .31 at the end, because the road fund is Fund 31. So yeah, I threw in an other miscellaneous at the bottom, just in case, because you never know what comes up in the future you might be able to get money for, but I try to encompass, and if there are any categories anyone feels is missing, I'm all ears. This is kind of, my hope is that when this is set up and potentially adopted, it will be an evergreen fund that will be easy to interpret for whoever is sitting in any of these chairs, where we know where things go and why they're going there. So, if you flip to the back, because this is an almost exactly 2 pages fund, you'll see that the coding repeats in engineering and general project expenses for those same categories. Because with a capital project, it's either engineering or design or purchasing and construction. Pretty much anything smaller than that, well, it's just going to end up in the fund that would house it. So I entered any of the grants we have assured already, and I noted where there are some where we might get a grant, but I don't know if we're getting it yet, so I didn't propose to include that revenue or that expense. If, for example, we get the gaming economic development money, that would go in 357 revenue, county and agency grants, and that would be under parks and recreation, similar to 355, 54, where the DCED Crafton Park Playground disbursement money is. So, yeah, this is a new thing, so I understand if there are questions, but I tried to make it as straightforward as possible so that it's just kind of internally consistent and also consistent with the way that the other funds are coded. So it's
It certainly makes our grant track record much
yes,
more visible.
yes.
Sure
I guess I probably should point out in the interfund transfers, that's 392 on the revenue side, you'll see those matches for different grants were transferred out of the funds that typically are thought of as reserved revenues. Road fund is reserved for street and cartway improvements. However, because we are using them for the same, just trying to keep the road fund size internally consistent, it's okay to have an interfund transfer with those. Also, transfer for sewer reserves to start paying down on the South Grandview and Crafton Boulevard expenses that are not readily available in our year-to-year operating revenues. It just made more sense than transferring into the sewer fund from the sewer reserve and then transferring out of the sewer fund into the capital projects. So I just cut out the middleman. So yeah, I understand if everyone wants to sit with this for a little bit and come back on the 7th if there are any questions or comments, since it's new, but, yeah.
Question,
Nice
zoning,
job.
the zoning expense, where is that?
The zoning expense,
What line is that?
Well, I didn't put anything in because we haven't committed to anything yet.
Alright, so,
where would it go?
You could either put it in a capital projects fund if you wanted, or I guess in
It seems
General
like a
fund,
capital project,
design
doesn't it?
and mobility.
I thought I saw in there.
We can put professional services in the capital budget.
I mean,
okay,
no,
Yes.
it's just
we-
like,
Yeah, I mean, I would think
Hold
so.
on, Philip,
depending on how we, imagining we're gonna budget for it. Or there's DCD funding, I'd like to see if we can get it, it'll pay up to 50% of the application, I was curious if we can look into that.
We can look into it, but then that would put us in the 2021 budget before we start working on it. So I think one of the things we have to think about is whether it's worth waiting another year.
What are the high and lows from the two proposals on the table?
I think it's a swing between 45 and 55.
So let's just say 55,000 on the high end. So it'll wait an extra year for 55,000.
For
For
25,000.
half of that,
Oh, it only matches half.
that's what.
At
I
most.
think it's
Yeah.
DCD is 50%.
50%.
And then I don't know if Port Authority helps if you get
No.
TCD.
They do not have a grant
Well,
program.
it's just, yeah.
I mean, you know, for comparison, we're taking in $25,000 for interest in the
So
general
right
fund.
now, high side, just say $60,000 between friends.
Mhm.
So what else is not in here that are things that I understand you haven't been given a mandate that we're going to do, but what are the things that we're likely going to do that aren't appearing in here?
I have put every single thing that we.
So everything else except for zoning is in here,
Yes, sir.
right?
Or, you know, bumping up the shade tree, but we've already talked about, you know, we want to spend down the reserves. So,
No,
right. So, I mean, it's just the same exact conversation
Sure.
for the same types of money.
Yeah, it's in here. Senior dinner
What?
is under recreation,
Yes.
and the,
What about, is there any other equipment or like fire or any other equipment outlays that may be in our future that aren't accounted for?
I mean, not
Any other
that I
Well,
can readily think of at this moment.
so with the fire truck that they're,
We would most likely not incur a new payment on that until 2021, because they wouldn't even be delivering it until the end of the year.
okay, okay.
That was, I didn't know how both of them.
All right, so Marcia's asking about
Thank
the
you very
senior
much.
dinner
What
budget.
was that you had there, sir?
That's under recreation.
453.23.
For,
I've been here until 8 o'clock most of the last couple weeks, but, you know, and
yeah,
that's just because I'm just working.
You wanna collect these back?
Yes, please, everyone's little note sheets, need them back, put your names on them. Thank you. 1, 2, 3.
But we're keeping our budget.
You're keeping your budget sheets.
Not putting anything in writing this time.
so, okay, but this is
Eric.
your proposed,
Thank
wait,
you very
Well,
much.
it's a little-
oh, offset 3,
Thank you. I like when people fill these out right. Sometimes
My
they don't.
handwriting? That's why I type. Yeah, why can't we have a Google Doc for this stuff? This is crazy.
Huh?
Chicken scratch.
Or what?
Your hands work fine, Eric.
Driving on Velvet.
Your arms.
Oh, that's not good. Between you two, it might be a little
Two
bit.
pens that are just as I write. You can write
Yeah, okay,
that.
hey, before everybody runs out, Marcia would like to discuss the senior dinner, right?
yes.
Okay. Take it away.
So what, so I'm seeing we've got this offset that has 800, but we're 367?
Well, 367 is just where we code the fees that people, like the $7 that you pay.
Okay,
in.
so that's it, this
So
is
right
it.
now, what you just proposed.
No,
367.50 is income.
okay.
The one we were looking at now
Oh,
is the
so basically
expense.
what we're saying is,
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That was, that should be 8,000, not 800. Wow.
thank you.
Last year it was 5, wasn't it?
It was a,
Couple
yeah,
percent.
that was,
You'll
woo!
manage.
Good job, Marcia.
Oh, your
Thank
number, your-
It's a senior.
Yeah, well, that just means to move the, I was wrong. That was gonna change.
Yeah, $800
Alright.
that we.
3 people proofread this and none of us got it.
Oh, yeah. You can get one Netflix subscription.
all right.
I was like,
Okay,
what
does that
are
answer
you
the
talking
question?
about, 800?
Okay,
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so Alice, Marcia, and Brad, we are forgoing the note sheets, right?
yeah,
Cool.
I'm happy to do that.
For the time being.
What, for,
I'm gonna drop something next time.
pardon?
Two,
Drop something. Say next time.
huh?
Yeah, no.
Well, next time we're supposed to work on final, this is where you're crafting the.
Yes, because if we don't
Thank you for your.
pass it,
Automation,
At the first November
efficiency,
meeting.
B-Rad.
we will
I
be
know,
here
man, if I could
Christmas
just
Eve.
become
Eve.
Skynet for
Passing
you, I
by.
would, but I
Right?
can't.
So don't do that, because we never do that.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And what was that?
Huh?
Only.
An hour and
hour
20.
and
An hour and 20 minutes over.
Come
Come
on.
on.
That's not bad.
Big deal.
Come on.
That's not
Yeah,
bad for
that's
me.
Come on. You guys are missing
I will.
Wait, you know what,
We're
we were here
missing
later
one.
last time.
it.
Yeah, we will.
We wrapped it up sooner.